Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, olúwa mi ò dìde ojú ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀.
Hello, and welcome to the Ashen Forge. I am Phantom X, joined as always by Diggs and the legendary Neurotoxin. How are you two doing?
Oh, the mushrooms are trying to eat my arms.
Oh, they are actually. Mushrooms, that background. Well, tonight we are going to spend a little bit of time on the Tulnar after the Toenar, I guess is now what the forum and everywhere else is calling them. Which is interesting because of what we'll talk a little bit about, and then move into some of the questions Q&A that we didn't get to from the last F stream, which actually there was one that we had discussed here about breeding mechanics, which will be interesting to talk about. That was answered. I don't know who asked, but so with the Tulnar, part of this discussion too is I had posted our previous video and had used a title that was supposed to mimic a movie, and I'm blanking on the movie, but Diggs pointed out that apparently the Tulnar actually have received a lot of hate, and that I wasn't aware of, and the video title actually also seeing it the next morning, it made sense. It was probably inappropriate, so it was changed. But I'm kind of curious. I didn't realize that there had been so much hate against them. And you're right, Stephen even mentioned it in the video. And I'm curious how that's now changed if you've read any of the forums since the reveal.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things that Stephen was wondering too. Stephen and Mark were wondering if the reveal would change some of that hatred that kind of delves over into racist hatred a little too easily in the forums and other places, like probably on Reddit too. But yeah, the other title, it's cool that you did that because I would not have mentioned it in the podcast, I think, had that not happened, because it irks me a little bit, but not so much that I normally rant about it. But yeah, in the forums, there's a lot of hatred against the Tulnar, but sometimes it jumps over to like last year, I think I read something that said, yeah, I'm going to make you my slave and make you Tulnar pick my cotton. And I'm like, really? Like, that kind of goes a little bit farther than, dwarf versus elf hatred, that rivalry there. The problem with the forums that we have is that when I jumped in on that, can we not go that far with the racism? And then people say, well, it's just fantasy racism, so that's okay. And
no, it's actually not. And 5e D&D is coming to that reconciliation right now.
Exactly. And you shouldn't be bringing up real world racism in the forums because that's not why I play games. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't play games to have to listen to people talk about how you're going to make people slaves and make them pick your cotton. I'd rather not have to deal with that when I'm playing video games. But when I bring stuff like that up, yeah, the moderators also say it's just fantasy racism, so you shouldn't be triggered by that. Like, oh, okay,
no,
well,
no, it doesn't matter if you've got purple people and green people, if you're still just taking real world race relationships and applying it to fantasy people. It's still just as hateful and hurtful, and in fact you might actually be enabling some much worse elements of society to kind of get off on that, because they know what it's coded for. They know who the different people are supposed to represent. So, in trying to be clever, you've ended up just, making the thing that you're exactly trying to avoid.
Yeah.
I'm posting a picture in chat. You could probably get the link real easily. It's off of the silhouettes we saw for the Tulnar.
Is it silhouettes from 2017?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see how someone would look at that and be like, they're freaking demon animals, you know, they're gonna be evil and warlike, this and that, and you know, immediately building up some hate for them. Yeah, people will do some wacky stuff with just the littlest amount of information. We see that all over social media when it comes to art and media and fanboyism and stuff. Now, given the explanations, I look back at this like, oh hell yeah, trying to tell, well, which ones are what mixtures of what kind of beast. Some of them, most of them seem like, if not all, having some sort of tail, for example. So this could very well be more of like the mammalian and reptilian being represented here, or maybe the humanoids have a tail too. We don't really get to know these details as much just yet.
Yeah, I think it's the beast and savage aspect of it. So savages are often looked upon as, something that can be marginalized and enslaved. But I think too, you posted that. I think it was Phantom that posted some of the lore on it with the caste system, and it does say that the major races and the minor races mixed. So once you already start with having major races and minor races, and then those two mixing, then I can see how some people can say, well, you're just basically a minor race, or you're less than a major race because you've mixed with the minor race. And people can go there, but but we do have sometimes interactions where dwarves hate elves and elves hate dwarves and all that stuff. And
Now
so
that's all some Tolkien stuff.
Yeah.
That relationship goes back to that. Just like
Yeah.
Horn
Well,
Viking helmets go all the way back to Wagner, and elves hating dwarves goes back to Tolkien.
Well, it's the same thing with orcs being savages and not being able to do magic and not being very intelligent and basically just being monsters and all that stuff that original D&D was based on. And it irked me even back in the late 70s, early 80s when I was playing D&D. Why does a half-orc have to be evil? Some form of evil, or at least can't be good. And can't learn magic or whatever. There's just all these limitations that it's the savage races and the colored races that have all these restrictions.
Oh, you mean a Eurocentric point of view? Yeah,
Exactly. It's all going back to Tolkien, but he's writing in the 1930s or something like that, so that's not too surprising. But we did get so it's been interesting that it's been like 5 years with just these silhouettes, and then we finally got 2 weeks ago, I guess, almost, or a week ago, we got that little toe of images of the Tonar, which looked pretty cool, and lots of people seem to be going for that lizard reptile version, which is my favorite too.
I don't know. One of the first posts on the forums is about furries, so I just
oh no, another game with animal creatures. Oh, it's furries. Oh, they're getting to the furries. No, come on. Fantasy worlds have people who are also beasties of various different kind. Are you going to tell me werewolves, old werewolf mythology was enabling of furries too? Really? Are you, how far back, where do we delineate when you were just making beast people, and at what point it became catering to furries? Sometime in the 60s or 70s or something? I don't believe it. I think that's a silly thing to say, is catering to furries. You're catering to people who are engaged in Western fantasy.
Yeah. And furries are usually coming from Asian fantasy. I mean, so.
They'll come from wherever, and it's cool. And like,
I'm saying originated. Once you
Oh.
started getting to anime and all that kind of stuff, it's a kind of motif that kind of
I'll
jumped
take
up
your
in there,
word
but-
for it. You know more about it than I do.
Yep.
That does sound reasonable. And to be clear to anyone watching, I'm not saying anything bad about furries. It's fine. People do their things, but no, I don't think that's what Tulnar exists to be. If we're talking about all of the races that existed before, at the point of the apocalypse, all trying to get into a place where they can be safe with, I'd have to read the lore again. I'm guessing one or multiple gods helping grant them that protection that keeps the ancients away from them.
So it's,
yeah.
The goddess of creation, we talked about this, that Stephen started to kind of spill the beans and mentioned the Toenar being protected by some means is how they've existed to this point. Because when you look, there are a couple of short stories. So it looks like the rough time frame we deal with here is about 4,000 years. There's a specific story about somebody's great grandmother 4,000 years ago with the King Atrax and everything else. So I think 4,000 years is roughly the time frame. But yeah, it was goddess of creation that apparently protected them under the ground, which we then talked about too. I think there's some good questions about magic and the essence, and if they are still on this specific area, not removed to Sanctus, do they have access, that the newcomers coming back don't have access? I think there's a lot of unknown questions.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting too. I'd like to see how that's going to play out in terms of whether or not the Tulnar helped the returning people, these people coming back from Sanctus,
or
whether they helped them get acclimated to, or any of them helped them get acclimated to magic.
I'm getting the idea though that actual day one of gameplay is everybody coming through, that there isn't anything established, that nobody is actually come through. And
we're the
second wave. Okay.
Yeah, so there's been a little time, and I think it's only been like a year or two. I don't think it's been
very long. That is definitely not very long. No.
Yeah, but,
I would wager that the magic that creates the portals back to Vera from Sanctus might be using from the same source of essence that had previously been protecting the Tulnar, such that both things kind of occur at the same time, that the protection is lifted as the gates open.
Well, we still don't really know why we're going back through the gates. So,
because the gates have opened.
Yeah, but we don't know what the calling has been. 4,000 years into all of a sudden be going back. Something clearly must have happened that the gods are now allowing this to occur.
The agents are no longer a threat, and now that they're open, people are just curious about jumping back to.
Well, there's still threats, right? That's what.
It's not that they're no longer a threat. It's just that their power has subsided enough that you might actually be able to come in and make a difference again.
Because corruption's still current, and that's where all of our things that we'll be fighting come from. I think there were some, going back to the Toenar in specific, what we saw, I think there are some good questions or good points made. 4,000 years, the way this is presented is it's a single religion, a single sort of cultural state of mind.
I wouldn't say a single religion.
That's the way it is in the wiki. That we have these 6 religions and the Toenar religion.
Six religions.
Well, I'm saying amongst the Toenar as a group, and the reason I'm going this way is because there are a couple of good posts I think that on the forums that make a point to say, this kind of actually what we were shown feels like 3 different races. So which I think has some validity of, they do seem drastically different. But we haven't seen enough of them, I guess, for sure. Because another point that was made was, I guess, originally you have a base Tulnar model, and these three that you have sliders of, so you can mix and blend them all. So we also don't know what the actual base
Yeah.
model is.
So about what we were shown. For one thing, um, we've only seen the head. We haven't seen the whole body. So you can expect that each of those actually have a mix of fur and reptilian, um, and mammalian and humanoid. They have a mix going through the rest of the body. It's not just all lizard or all, lion or all. It's probably all of them have a mix. Uh, they're showing a mix of the three that were mentioned, kind of humanoid, mammalian, and reptilian. And we weren't supposed to get even that much. They're just showing you a little taste, and that was last minute. And so they just gave you a little taste of the differences of mammalian, reptilian, and stuff, just at the head. So again, I think if we saw the full body, we'd see more of a mix, kind of like we do in the silhouettes.
The other thing that
Um,
the other thing I'm interested in that we don't know much about, again, this concept of there being one singular race. We know above ground, over time, there was this separation into four major and some minor. I'm also trying to understand why, the underground is vast, it's large. So why there was only one underground when we had so many above ground. So whether that's,
wait, one underground what?
again, they refer to the Toenar as one race. So why, when the underground is so large, why is it that there is only one that is underground? Now, that again could be this whole idea of the goddess of creation sacrifice. And he did say protection, then he walked backwards. So maybe there's just one specific area or section or two that were protected from the ancients and the others. And that's why there's only one sort of blended race. Because
Or is it the whole of the underground?
well, but it's
Right.
large, is and they mentioned specifically that places it's not all connected either. That crevices and could be crevices that you can't connect to one to the other. So conceivably, there should be groups that have been isolated over time. So I'm just curious about the lore, how we've sort of come to this.
Yeah,
I guess I kind of got the feeling that things do kind of move and shift and change under there over time, and that we'll see that with the tier system and the season system underground very sharply and dynamically, that maybe as the tier increases or depending on seasonal conditions, it could be causing like full movements, full shifts in what underground section is adjacent to what other underground section, such that there is like an underground migratory path, for example. So even though they're not always open to each other all the time, there are opportunities and instances where they'll be able to meet and travel and mix and trade and all that stuff.
but I think that there was a god responsible for each of the splits, which is why I think each race was worshiping a specific god, because a god was like the Vec have one, and the Pyrian have one. I'm saying Vec, but it's the Kai Vec probably, I guess. So I think there was a god responsible for each race, which is probably why there's one for the Tulnar as well. And I think even don't we? Well, no, we have 9 races, so, and 7 gods. Um, mhm. And what does pagan mean? Where in a
Yeah.
world where real gods walk the earth, I'm not sure what pagan means, but okay.
Hmm.
Oh, I'm muted. Thank you. Yeah. No, I was pointing out that the Tulnar religion, it says, is a combination of religious beliefs of the major races as well as pagan beliefs of the minor races, and that it just seems strange that all of the minor races were considered pagan. Compared to who? Compared to the major people, I guess.
Who wrote this stuff?
Which is, again, why I find it interesting that you end up with a race that is so heavily not like the other main races. So there has to have been something happen within that lore, whether or not perhaps minor races tended to be in those areas more so anyway. So there was just a larger number. That would be the most likely reason that you have such a drastic change over that time. But
I kind of want to go back to that caste system thing, because we talked about that a little bit in the in our conversations before the show.
I was about to send us there too, so that's
I don't know about the caste system being necessarily like, is that exactly how you want to represent it? Because that definitely implies a hierarchy, and when you've got a hierarchy in that sort of way, well, now you're talking about, like, you know, potentially getting into the realm of eugenics. And is that really the direction we're trying to go with the Tulnar, who already have like a strained, like, you know, race relation perspective from players for whatever reason? I would imagine something a little bit different occurring, where as different peoples specialize in different ways or take up certain tasks that they, you know, do better at, that might be part of not necessarily a caste system, but I kind of think more of like, you know, worker organizations, or like, you know, the Soviets back from the old days of the Soviet Union, where it's a group of people who focus on a specific aspect of production, and they manage that and they maintain that, and they work in concert with everyone else and all the other groups to make sure everybody's getting everything, and that nobody's trying to screw the other or play the other, you know, play them against each other. So I could see the god or gods being kind of the mediators of that. And then the example I gave in our little chat was the reptilian ones, more reptilian-like, might be more adept with water and dealing with water purification, water management, irrigation, making wells, that sort of stuff, particularly due to the you know, water running off the scales pretty easily, and amphibious components that would, you know, better breathing for, you know, dealing with water going down for extended periods of time. The more mammalian ones, the initial thought I had was beast of burden, but instead kind of backed off from that. More materials and transportation. They're your miners. They're your warehouse managers. They're the ones that get things from point A to point B. They deal with the distribution to make sure everybody's getting things in a timely manner. And so that would be kind of what they're working on. And then the more humanoid ones, then if, you know, food and water and transportation and stuff are kind of taken care of, the ability to have a bit of a different, like an administrative, not managerial, not to necessarily be on a pedestal above other people where you're working in an office and they're working in the fields and rivers, but to be working in concert with the other organizations or the other kind of specializations within the races to ensure that everything's being facilitated as optimally as possible. These would then be like your accountants and your census takers and stuff like that. And so it's not that they necessarily have a role that's higher than anybody else, that anybody has a role that's higher. It's that everybody needs to be doing all of these things together. Otherwise, they start getting back into modes of struggle and losing some of the benefits of art and culture and technology and invention and sort of stuff that you actually get to engage in when you have surplus and you're not working every last moment of every day to survive and then go to sleep. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to see is, not a caste system, not here's the top people and here's the median people and then here's the ones at the bottom. And, that's obviously going to create different sorts of, relations with the players, with the characters playing the different players. If it's like reptiles are at the bottom of the system, then I would imagine they're the ones that the more toxic players would specifically be throwing their hate and racist attacks and stuff at. Is, oh, you're a worthless blah blah blah. They don't even want you in Tulnar society. You're only good enough to pick carrots or whatever. That's the sort of stuff that I would hope to see them kind of avoid by getting away from a caste system and moving to something where everybody's fairly equally represented, but also, there's the god as the manager or the gods that, kind of make sure things are otherwise being maintained.
Yeah, the rest of the quote that was posted in chat says that how heavy you're influenced by one of the three bestial, humanoid, or reptilian is going to influence how NPCs react to you. And part of that has me wondering about, especially if it's appearance, right? So that was a quote from Steven from 2018. So that's before the UE5 update to the character creator. That's before the significant changes to the appearance of the Vec. So as we're kind of thinking about, I think Phantom kind of alluded to this last week. When we're thinking of what the base Tulnar looks like, how much elf is there, how much dwarf is there, how much orc is there, and then right, so we have mammalian and or bestial. We have bestial and reptilian features that we can do. And originally, I'm thinking it's mostly for humanoid. It's mostly going to look like a human, much like dwarves look facially pretty much human, and elves look pretty much human. But now we've got the Vec, which don't really look human, and the Pyre look significantly different. So I wonder,
even the
how much
Empyreans look a lot less human now, but I suppose that's partially because their headdresses look like they actually have feathery branch
yeah,
their
no,
things.
I think they still look pretty much human, but I wonder too. So is that going to be a factor? Like how much more uh, orc can we get the face to appear? But that being said, now that we do have drastic differences with the Vec and the Pyre, that makes me wonder what the original elves looked like, somewhere in between a Pyre and an Empyrean. What did the original Kyvek orcs look like? Somewhere in between a Renkai and a Vec? I mean, now I want to see images of what those ancestor races looked like now that we have such drastic differences. And then also has me wondering if the Tulnar have this kind of, oh, you look different, you look so reptilian. How will they have similar receptions to a Vec? Like, we don't even know what you are. You didn't even exist. You're really supposed to be from Vera. You don't look like anything that we know that came from Vera. I just wonder.
I kind of go back to the idea that maybe some of them stayed more towards the pre-apocalypse versions that the the Kalar, the Renkai, the Empyreans, and the Toenar look more like the original races, and that the Nikua, the Veilun, the Vec, and Pyre are more of the weird magical version that manifested for whatever reason
On a world with no magic?
on a world with very, very, very limited essence. And I don't know if it's like, if there's like a more of a diffusion sort of thing, there's just like approximately 5% essence everywhere across the entirety of Sanctus, or if it's like, you know, areas of higher and lower concentration. Like most of the place you're not going to see any, but there's like a little pool here and a little pool there, and if you stand in it and you focus real hard on a fireball, you can make like a teeny little spark appear.
I don't think so, but it's probably a very different environment than Vera in any case. So I guess you could evolve in different ways. But again, we don't know. I mean, we kind of assume that's the way it is, but the now that the changes have been made, we who knows what the assumptions we had for the lore or appearance might be. I don't know, because in Apocalypse we only had humans. I don't think we had
Yeah, I think
images
you're right.
of Kyvex. So we don't know what. Well, we had Empyrean statues, I think. Or,
Yeah, but I
we
think
had
it
Pyrean
was.
statues.
I think you're right though that it was just the humans, because of course, what's a more human thing to do than when the world's coming to an end to race around fighting each other to the very last? Like, that's the most human thing I can think of in an apocalypse. Everything's coming to an end. It's your fault. I'll kill you. Yeah, that that checks out.
Yeah. So we'll just have to see. We had Pyrean statues, but yeah, we'll have to see what they look like, and again, we'll have to see what the reaction is when
Yep.
you don't even recognize the people coming back through the portals.
You know, the other just interesting in my mind is, you know, are we mixing up, or is Intrepid mixing up the idea of race versus species? Like we keep talking about, like, how could they breed? Well, if you're, you know, races can interbreed. Species on the, you know, different species on the other hand can't. When we talk about the difference between, you know, tigers and humans,
It's one thing I liked with the game that we generally don't mention, is that the different peoples were referred to not as races, but as tribes, implying that though they were vastly different in appearance and adaptation, that they all came from some original sort of peoples and specialized in their various ways over millennia with magic and other things. I don't get the feeling that that's necessarily going on here. Then again, this is also a magical world and everything's fantasy, and I kind of think that it's fine if everybody can get with everybody. It doesn't matter. Or if people can't just everybody get with everybody. That kind of gets, to the idea of the Tulnar forming into who they are based on who could produce viable offspring with who, and that just continuing to mix and match and meld and shift and change, and maybe over time two populations that couldn't now have stable enough versions from different types of partners that they too can start to get together in the mix and have viable offspring. Or I also think about it from the other angle. Do we even have the same DNA? Or is there even like the same amount of chromosomes? Do elves even have like a double helix? Maybe they've got a triple helix for some magic reason. That's not going to work. but you know, it's one of those things where they can do whatever they want because it's a fantasy world, and so it's kind of going to be up to the lore team to really define out the rules and terms and limitations of everything.
Yeah, and to your character, to us, it's reptilian, it's cat-like, but your character, will they know what a reptile looks like? Like, it's just, you know, what are the names of the minor races? I'm just really curious as to that and the lore. The only other thing I would put out from reading through the forum feedback that I agree with, and I posted it in chat, was that it seems like horns are on everything now. And why do we need to have horns on everything? So there were
everyone in the game is
there were multiple,
you know, the word I was going for.
Multiple posts on, you know, hey, it looks cool, but do we really have to have horns and tusks and branch, all these things on all of our characters? So I think,
yeah, because the modeling team has to make room for all the horns and everything to come through the helmets.
So I thought it was fair feedback. There wasn't really anything else. I wrote some of them down, but nothing else that really. It's interesting, Diggs. I guess this is also where I started this conversation at, is that, you know, from what you said, there was a lot of hate to Tulnar. And really, when you look anywhere, YouTube, Twitter, their forums on the feedback, it's entirely positive, which seems kind of strange that there's such a swing. Now, I think part of that is just people just, you know, they're going to say yay to everything, but we'll see if in a couple of weeks it's continued optimism. The one thing that seemed disappointing to several people is not having an avian feature or an insectoid type. But
yeah, I mean, I think I even brought that up last week.
And they had mentioned that would not occur, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always hoping for an insectoid. I think I started thinking about this back in when, gosh, it's what 8 or 9 years ago with EverQuest Next, and hoping that we could have some form of non-binary race insectoid that isn't thinking about gender. But doesn't look like we're going to get that yet. Not anytime soon. It's kind of funny that furries are so popular, but insectoids are not.
I guess cicadas aren't sexy enough. No, I think people still have like an overlying sort of like bugs are icky sort of. You know, even if you see them a happy furry like bee, and it's like, you know, if it didn't have the pokey part on the end, you just want to give it a big old snuggle. But, you know, no, that's not most people with most animals, or insects rather.
Okay. Well, any other thoughts on the Tulnar at this point?
Want to see more, need to see more. We ain't gonna see more for a long time.
I gotta say, I'm not probably not going to go that route. There would have to be something very either extremely unique and fun about the underworld, or I would have to have an ability to not be so drastic in one of those three looks for me to pick that. So sounds like both of you though would maybe be more than okay with, or be okay with giving it a go as a race.
I mean, I just added 1 to my 5, so now I have 6 alts instead of 5 alts. You know, so far. So,
all right. Well, on to questions. I'll just kind of go knock them off down the list. So the first one that came up, will mobs knock back people off their mounts, or will mounted players bypass all mobs easily? The answer to this was no, that mobs will have the ability, or some at least, to special abilities to knock you off a rider, knock the rider off their mount, which I guess makes sense. Although I started thinking, are there games that I've played when I'm on a mount where I'm easily knocked off? And the answer to that's no.
thought, wow, if you got hit, you were immediately knocked off. Maybe I'm mistaken.
Well, that's
I think
true.
immediately knocked off. Immediately knocked off.
Maybe
think
in
it's
vanilla
yeah,
WoW, maybe
yeah.
not.
Yeah. But there was a cool thread a couple of weeks ago about mounts and wanting a delay in terms of getting on a mount while in combat. And I was like, what does in combat mean? Does that mean if somebody attacks you, that means it's going to be a delay before you can get on your mount? Like, I don't know what it is, 10-second, that adds a 10-second delay. And they were saying because you shouldn't be able to, if you're in combat, you shouldn't be able to just hop on a mount and run away. I'm like, but if I'm choosing not to enter combat and want to run, just me getting hit should not give me a delay in
With the
escaping.
game being all about logistics and stuff, it actually makes more sense that every time you get on the mount takes a delay, and every time you get off is some amount of delay. Regardless of whether you're in combat or not, regardless of whether you're in a complete safe zone or not. Because that's one of those, if you're in a foot race with someone, you're in a land race, if you just spotted someone that you want to get the hell away from and you want to get away from them on a mount before they get to you on their mount, um, that timing should matter. And with that, I could even see skills and saddles and stuff that are specific to that you have a mount that you've specialized to be easy to mount, to get on quickly, that the saddle is one that's easy to get on. So instead of specializing for combat gear, you've specialized specifically for mounting and dismounting as quickly as possible. That makes a lot more sense to me as making it a part of the whole of gameplay, because whether you're in combat or you might be in combat, if those people coming want to be or not, but you don't know yet, everything that you're doing is done in the danger of the world. As far as I'm concerned, you're technically always in combat, you're just not always fighting something.
Well, I mean, we all
You're always under threat and
combatants.
duress.
By default, we're non-combatants, so we can't always be in combat. That can't actually be a thing, because by default we're non-combatants.
Yeah,
So.
we can always be under duress though, and so under those rules, unless there's areas that will physically be, you can't attack anybody here, period, whatsoever, which so far we haven't seen in the alpha.
No, everywhere in the open world is possible for PvP. There's no safe spots. Technically, not even inside nodes. But.
Right. So yes, I agree. You are not always in combat, but I guess you are always in a state where combat could occur.
Yeah. That just means you're outside. I mean, that's like I tell people all the time. I walk down the streets of Compton and Inglewood in the middle of the night. I haven't been mugged yet. And that doesn't mean it could never happen, but it still rarely happens because of the penalties we have in place for what happens if they get caught doing it. But but it seems to me also that some of that's going to be taken into account by the type of mount you have, in terms of if you want to be able to catch up with someone running away, then you get a faster mount, you breed a faster mount, or you get one that has speed as a because there's combat mounts as well, so maybe you get one that has trap powers to snare your running away opponent. There's all kinds of stuff you could do to, there should be all kinds of stuff. You want to
blast him with the snorsku.
Yeah. So it's not just because you hopped on a mount, you automatically get away. That's not really going to be a thing in Ashes. So I'm not too concerned about that.
All right.
Next question. Considering the recent update we've seen to combat, has the team decided on if there will be a global cooldown or not? This was basically not answered, other than we will see new things implemented in Alpha 2 and test it. It does sound like they're considering the idea of not just one single global cooldown, but possibly cooldowns across different types of abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we'll see. It's hard to talk about that one until we get a chance to play.
Yeah, I feel
will
like
there be a cap?
I feel like that tends to be most answers to anything combat anymore is, well, yeah, we've been working on it and we're going to test it out and see if people like it. And that's sort of been the answer for 4 years. So,
well, I think A2 is going to actually let us really see a lot more of that. Hopefully, they're actually at a point where we can give them solid feedback on solid systems that are solid. Not to say that combat wasn't functional in A1, but it was that. It was functional. You know, it was MMO combat in an alpha.
yeah, I'm going to be cooking anyways, so I could give a crap about combat. All right. Yeah. Next question was, will there be a cap on how many times an animal can be bred in animal husbandry? And again, we had actually kind of stumbled onto that question. Well, if I have just an A+ horse, can I just endlessly breed this thing, knowing that based off of averages, I'll probably get some that I have to throw away, but also I'm going to get some very good ones. The answer is yes, there will absolutely be a cap. That will be defined by both the type of animal, the quality of that animal, and for what purposes it's being used in the animal husbandry system. So not necessarily a surprising answer, although that last one, I'm really curious what he means by what purposes it's being used for in the animal husbandry system. I think of one use in a animal husbandry system, which is essentially breeding. So what is the other purpose? I don't know what that means.
I'm wondering if this is like a quality versus quantity sort of thing. Like if you've got rabbits and you're trying to make more rabbits to make more rabbits to make more rabbits, they might be something that's got a lot of breeding opportunities and a high turnover, versus if you're trying to get like an albatross to mate with other albatross. They only do one egg per year, and even with that, how long are they going to live? Or how long are they going to be viable in the world of Era? So I wonder if it's somewhat of that, or if it's a different sort of quantity versus quality. Like, well, you can just be stud and make a bunch more horses, or you can develop this special relationship between your star horse and this other star horse. And even though you're not going to be churning out as many babies, you're going to be getting higher quality ones instead of just indiscriminately, firing away and seeing what you can get. What limitations there are, we'll see.
Yeah.
About 3 weeks ago in the forum, somebody was asking if and suggested they really want to be able to castrate their animals. It's like I don't think they're going to do castration. Well, yeah, we should be able to neuter them so that if I get this really, really, really great, let's say horse, and I don't want anybody to be able to replicate that, but I want to sell it. I don't want the people that I sell it to be able to replicate my recipe. I was like, yeah, and I kind of see where that might be a thing, but I don't think they're actually going to have castration. I don't think so. So I think, to me, this kind of answered that yes, if you want to limit other people from being able to figure out your recipe or breed or whatever, then wait until you're limited breeding. It can't breed anymore, so you're not going to be able to take that. Then you sell it, and the people who get that won't be able to breed it, so they won't be able to replicate your stuff, whatever your attributes are.
I'm also that's just a weird question, but I'm also curious. You mentioned quality. If your higher quality animals are going to be able to be bred more, or is it the medium quality? I think in the long run, you wouldn't want the higher quality to be the one that gets the bonus there. So I'm just curious how that also end up.
I could see it being one of those like attribute scalar sort of things where if like the speed and the health and maybe like some other thing are completely maxed out, the trade-off you're going to have is like you're going to get one, maybe two kids off of this one, and that's that. Versus maybe one that's got like a couple of meters pretty good and a couple of them like kind of okay. It's like, nope, this guy's just raring to go. Just keep a steady stream of ladies coming, and you're going to get a whole bunch of decent mid range of this dude that has a profile of attributes that you're targeting.
No.
It'll be interesting to see. That's a question for Dr. Bucky.
Well, I feel like they probably will be adding in quite a lot of randomness into this, because over a year of this, eventually you're just going to, by at law of averages, be able to breed out pretty good things over time, unless there's just a significant portion of randomness inserted in, or
it could also be a stability related thing that you've got to have a stables at a location for like 6 real world months of time at a tier 5 or above to actually even have access to the conditions for the top tier of mounts, and that it could be as soon as that place gets knocked over, there goes all your progress, and that could be part of the limit that only the tier 5 and 6s that remain for a long time are the ones that even have the stability to allow for that sort of specificity.
Yeah, in Wizard 101, where I was kind of the Charles Darwin of that game, I unlocked how to breed the attributes that you want. PvP people especially would eventually try and get not only top tier PvP powers, but also do things like you have a fire hound, but you give it all ice abilities so that your opponents will see a fire pet. It appears to be a fire pet, but it's really an ice pet. So it's not just about getting the most powerful, but some of it is about trying to get unexpected things into different pets, so that your opponents can't necessarily prepare as well. So we'll see how well we're able to do that in Ashes.
I'm going to probably mispronounce your name, but Bochi in chat also makes a good point whether seasons will affect the breeding process. So I imagine it will, especially for things that hibernate or disappear over periods of time. So that's something else, I guess, to think about for long
Maybe
term.
you don't want to try and breed your ice pets during the summer. I don't know.
I don't know about that.
Interesting. I don't know. I'm just saying.
We're about out of time, so we maybe can do one or two. I'm going to skip to another. One we actually already talked about last week, which was the flags on ships. But this is just a pet peeve of mine that we also kind of briefly talked about. But the question was, it said asking about Alpha 2 primarily, and this was Maggie. She said primarily because a lot of content creators have been talking about this. But the question was, will Alpha 2 be feature complete before betas or launch before beta? And that question made me want to cry. And I died a little bit inside, especially since it's apparently a lot of content creators asking that question, and understanding game development and early access has just ruined everything. What do you call these anymore? I mean, does it matter if it's an alpha or a beta?
Well,
Uh,
if it's not feature complete, then it's still an alpha. So, they're still doing that part correctly. I definitely share your frustration about what things are called has kind of been muddied with open development and also indie development a little bit. Not necessarily to blame those, but um, what we used to think of as just like a stress test is now being called early access and being sold to people. What people used to think was an alpha or even a pre-alpha or even a pre-production prototype is now being called alpha and beta. And then beta can be anywhere from what used to be, pre-production to the day before launch. And then what's even launched these days, you get two launches now. You get your early access launch and then your real launch. Yeah, it's a little bit of a funny thing, and I can understand how what used to be sort of standardized production phrases and terminology um, have now just kind of become marketing buzzwords that have kind of lost their meaning to some extent to some folks.
yeah, I mean, I think this hit my radar with Landmark EverQuest Next with their packs, because they had an alpha pack and they had a beta pack, and and what determined that was the pack. So beta was what they said you were purchasing, because there is a date that you would get that beta, and they had to go by. It's going to be released on this date. You're going to get access on this date, and
Don't let
that's what they went
marketing
with.
set your deadlines. Never let marketing set your deadlines.
Yeah. And that seems to be kind of the trend since then. It was a big thing with Daybreak, and I think it was hysterical to me when they released their alpha, and they were like, "Oh, this is a release," and I'm like, "No, that's an alpha. That's not." I finally released a game. No, that's an alpha. That's not a release. But Steven is trying to go back towards true alpha, true beta. They're trying not to give out dates. Um, uh, he did the fun thing about that. I think it was yesterday. Someone was asking about, or they made a post on the forum saying that they would like for Bard and Summoner to be the next um, archetypes that are released for Alpha 2, and they think they want those to be early. So they're saying that they probably will trickle in the new archetypes instead of having them all available at um, the launch of Alpha 2. And I think Steven's trying to have all 8 at the launch of Alpha 2, but the way he's been adding extra alphas and stuff. We had Alpha 0, then Apocalypse was going to be Alpha 1, then it was going to be Alpha 1 Phase 1 or Alpha 1 Phase 2. Then you've got, no, it's its own separate thing. And then we're going to have this Alpha. For all we know, we could have an Alpha 1.5 pop up. Who knows what he will actually do?
Alpha 1
and
spot testing.
Yeah. That spot testing thing is still available, and I don't think we can have Alpha 1 spot testing at this point because of E5 is so different. But yeah, at one point Ranger was going to be in Alpha 2, but I mean Ranger was going to be in Alpha 1, but it never made it into Alpha 1. We were going to have a Horde mode and Siege mode in Apocalypse, and that never happened. So who knows when in 2024 we finally get to Alpha 2? Who knows what will be in when we first get access to it? Um, I don't know. But I don't think we can rely on any Steven quotes for that.
Well, I liked his
really.
answer. His answer was an educated one of, yes, the game will be feature complete before beta. That is necessary for beta, as beta is intended to identify last minute bugs and make sure everything is ready for launch. So, I mean, he's at least trying to correct that. That just drives me nuts.
Yeah, and he also said that Alpha 2. So at this point, Alpha 2 will not have everything in it. And I think not even everything, at the end of Alpha 2, they'll be trickling stuff in during Alpha 2, I think.
I like how the Alpha 2 servers are going to be their test servers. I mean, I think that's actually
persistent.
Pretty, yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I get tired of, as you are a tester and you go through, we're experiencing this now with something we can't talk about. But as you sort of re-experience an Alpha 1, 2, 3, 4, it gets kind of challenging to stay excited because you've done this 4 times already, and you're not going to continue to have this character for the 5th time. So having a persistence, although I'm sure there'll be server resets and rollbacks and things as problems happen, but I think that'll be helpful in keeping people engaged and interested in trying to be a completionist in an alpha setting. So
I also don't mind some downtime, weeks of downtime if necessary, because it's still, as we learned from Landmark, it's still super challenging to keep something running and people happy 24/7 for a year or more. So if they need to take a break so that they can actually get some work done that will progress the game rather than constantly trying to do bug fixes and keeping the people playing it happy 24/7, I'm all for taking a little bit of time off, and then not too much time, but make sure you have time to actually work on the stuff you need to work on instead of just trying to keep people happy during early access. That's the downfall.
Well, that being said, I think we are over, or do you have time for one more question? Or
let's do one more.
All right, one more. One more, and then we'll be done, and we'll save the rest for next time. This was also interesting. The question was whether or not, again, your guildmate can help you remove corruption by PKing you, or just a friend or anyone. And the answer was yes at this point, that your corruption takes precedent over any kind of a relationship. So anyone can kill you if they like. He tried to say that there are systems hopefully in place to prevent this, such as that your body as a corrupt player will be visible on map. I assume that even means that through death, and so that people could try to come steal things from you, which an interesting bounty system. But even then, though, I would think if that's the case, you would just say, hey, Diggs, I want you to kill me. Hold on to my stuff. When I come back, give it to me. So I don't know how much.
You can't trade. There's no trade, so I don't know how you would do that. But
what do you mean?
Corrupted people cannot trade.
Yeah, but if you kill them and you loot them, then you can trade with them again because they're not corrupted because you killed them.
Yeah, the whole point of that is people trying to, they can camp you and then they can just have somebody kill them to get their corruption removed and not have any negative outcome to that.
But I don't.
I have a feeling.
Wait. So go through that. So you kill them and what? I kill you.
So if I went on a killing spree and I was just somebody was Care Bear and I didn't like it, so I just spawn camped him forever, just harassed him, and I gained a bunch of corruption. I could then go to Neuro, who's a guildmate of mine, and say, hey, come over to this wooded area. I want you to kill me a few times to relieve my corruption down. When you do the first time, take my items for me, and then you just do that over until your corruption is reduced, and then there's essentially no risk to you unless you trusted a friend who's not trustworthy and doesn't give you your stuff back. But that's the sort of loophole concern. Now, he did also say, of it, like everything else, we'll test it in Alpha 2 and see if we keep it. But
what I expect is going to happen is that you'll have a 2-part PK group. One is the group that's actually doing the killing and accumulating the corruption. And then the other is the people from that same organization killing the people who got the corruption to get the stuff back. And And you're basically going to have a system that fully nullifies and invalidates the purpose of corruption, because the moment you've gotten corrupted, your buddies will just mass kill you and knock it all off. I would maybe hope to see like a reduction based on how far removed a person is from you. If the person is a guildmate and a member of your family or whatever, they're only going to knock off 5% or 10% of the corruption that a bounty hunter who's coming for the kill and the steal to get your items after killing you, would get, versus that bounty hunter who doesn't know you, has no relationship with you. They get a bounty to go hunt and kill you. They succeed by fulfilling it as a bounty hunter. They're going to do the whole 100%. They're going to get maximum drops off of you, and likewise allow you to shut off as much corruption as possible because you just got hit with the biggest penalty possible from it. That's kind of what I'm hoping to see. So the more tightly knit and related to other people you are, the more times they'll have to keep killing you and grabbing one or two of the items you drop until you've shut off all the corruption, versus somebody who has no good relations with you in any way or any relations whatsoever is going to be the one who's going to get the most loot. And as a result, because you've been hit with such a big penalty from that, you're going to lose the largest amount of corruption off of that. That's kind of the way I would, maybe approach it.
But when you die, you're going to have that 4x death penalty. So that's not only just dropping stuff, that's also your not only your stats taking a hit, but also your armor and gear take a hit, and you don't drop all of that gear.
But you have to have that happen anyways, right? But my point is, it doesn't matter who kills you. That's going to have to happen regardless. So that the risk here is just letting someone else.
All I'm saying is you get rid of the corruption, but you're still getting 4x death penalties, and that is a hit to your gear as well. And
but gear
doesn't really drop.
But if you're corrupted, it doesn't matter.
What do you mean?
You're going to have to do that anyways to remove it. So that the thing here with having a friend being able to kill you is that the gear
I know
whatever you do lose, they can take.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but that's not as helpful as you're making it seem to be, because the issue is not losing resources. The issue is all of the gear hits. Your gear gets depreciated over time, and not all of your gear drops. All of your gear takes that hit, but not all of only a couple of your pieces. So
I could see groups of people going out there in crap iron gear, but being high level and still being able to overwhelm one or two people. And then, if you have to take the hits to get your stuff cleared, that's fine. It was crap iron gear. It didn't, it was junk to begin with. But I could see that being something that player killers sort of do, and corruption related people, to reduce the hit to them for going and doing this method, and then whatever the attribute reduction is for how long, until we actually see that play out, it's hard to tell how much it's going to mitigate anybody. I don't feel like we saw it at all in A1, and as a result, when they made it open PvP, it was just a gank fest.
Well, and what's doesn't that lessen the whole point of being a bounty hunter? I mean, of course, part of bounty hunting is the reputation, but another part of it is the stuff you're going to get when you kill somebody who's corrupted. So where's the incentive of doing that? I mean, I've said this many times. A long time ago, we've talked about this. I don't think the corruption system works as it does. I think it eventually gets changed into something else.
They're saying it's corruption is harsher than it was in Lineage 2, and it worked in Lineage 2. But bounty hunting, there's quests associated with that as well, and I think that means there's probably rewards associated with those quests. So it's not just based on what you acquire from straight up from killing.
Well, Sir
the corrupted
Onsington makes a good point too. We could, what about taking cash payments just to get your stuff back? I create a business. Hey, if you're corrupted, come here. I'll kill you. I'll give you back your stuff. Just give me some money. So there's so many. I think that this is a very large loophole. It really removes a portion of the whole purpose of having corruption from the table. So I have a feeling it goes away, or they just change to a different system altogether.
Again, I doubt it, because it's already something that is working in Lineage 2. So it may be just that you have to play Lineage 2 to understand.
It's funny though. I searched Lineage 2 corruption. Ashes of Creation comes up, and the person said one of the big issues is that top clans would just put summoners who are naked in places, and they would still lock down a zone. And so it, the karma system absolutely didn't matter if you could just be a naked summoner and still just bring massive threats out. So, that that is definitely something we'll likely be seeing tested and refined and redone multiple times over the Alpha 2. Probably not even Alpha 2. I would imagine like Beta is where we're really going to start seeing, is corruption in the state that it ends up being viable? Or if not, this is our time to mess with it and try to get it right. They might do some stuff leading up to, but I think Beta is where they're really going to be putting the big resources into finally resolving what they want to do with the corruption system.
Well, in this, they seem obviously aware. I don't think I'd said verbatim. So Steven's initial response to this question was, quote, "You're like, can I exploit this?" And that's a very good question, end quote. So they're obviously clearly aware, but if gamers are already going to be exploiting this, I just don't understand why you would leave it in. Other than it's probably
because Steven's one of the people that would be exploiting it, and so he loves it, and it's like, I want to do the thing.
Yeah. Which is funny because of the 10 billion gold video that I put up where they're talking about people that exploit and how they'll ban them. But here it seems to be an accepted possibility.
Well,
so
we're talking about cheating versus angle shooting. That's I could make a big... anyway, go ahead.
All the people who play Lineage 2 say that karma worked in Lineage 2. So they think it'll work.
All right.
And
it's probably because there were like 10 people playing.
I don't know.
All right. Well, we will end on that note. We will hopefully be back next week. I actually have to go somewhere over the weekend, but I should be back in time for us to be live. So everyone have a great week, and we will see you here on Sunday.
Hey there, everybody.
Thanks for joining us.